all of you, whether you're attending virtually or in person, to this afternoon's May 2024 Federal Maritime Commission meeting. I want to thank the Surface Transportation Board for, again, allowing us to use their hearing room while the FMC's hearing room is under renovation. I especially want to thank and congratulate the new chairman of the Surface Transportation Board, Robert Primus, who succeeds the retiring Marty Oberman. On a personal note, I will miss Marty tremendously. But Robert and I go back to many decades when we were both young, or at least younger, staffers at the House of Representatives. I am just very, very pleased that he is the chairman. I also want to extend greetings to the other STB commissioners, in particular the senior Republican, Patrick Fuchs, who I want to congratulate also, since he was just confirmed for another term on the STB. We do greatly appreciate the STB's continued hospitality so that these meetings can be held regularly. I do, for one, believe the continued close working relationship of the Surface Transportation Board and the Federal Maritime Commission can only be a benefit to American importers and exporters. Today, the Commission will hear updates from the staff on the Bureau of Certification and Licensing programs related to ocean transportation intermediaries and passenger vessel operators, and the Vessel Operating Common Carrier Audit Program. I should note that a portion of our second agenda item will have to be closed to the public because of the proprietary business information that could be discussed in that. I also want to briefly say that there are various elements of the implementation of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022, which continue apace, even though they are not the subject of this particular commission meeting. For example, the final rule concerning detention and demurrage billing practices took effect yesterday morning at 12:01 a.m. For more information on that or other OSRA 2022 implementation issues, I want to direct the public to our website, fmc.gov. And with that, we will turn to the updates on this afternoon's agenda. Mr. Secretary, the commission is ready for the first item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The first item on your agenda is staff update on Bureau of Certification and Licensing programs related to ocean transportation intermediary and passenger vessel operator. This item will be presented by Deputy Managing Director Cindy Hennigan, Passenger Vessel Operators Program Manager Tawanda Singletary, and Bureau of Certification and Licensing Program Special Advisor Rusty Haynes. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Maffei, Commissioners Dye, Benso, Sola, and Vekic. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you and the public today in this open session. BCL staff, Mr. Russell Haynes, Ms. Tawanda Singletary, and I will be providing you a status update on the Commission 2 highly distinguished programs, the Ocean Transportation Intermediary and the Passenger Vessel Operator Program that is outstandingly governed by the Bureau of Certification and License, also known as BCL. Today's agenda is as follows: a BCL overview presented by yours truly, an OTI program overview presented by Mr. Rusty Haynes, which is our BCL Special Advisor, a PVO program overview presented by Ms. Tawanda Singletary, which is our PVO Program Manager, followed by questions at the end that you may have for us. The Bureau of Certification and Licensing supports the Commission mission by protecting the public from financial harms and contributes to the integrity of the U.S. supply chain and transportation system through its issuance of ocean transportation intermediary license and foreign registration to qualify ocean freight forwarders and non-vessel operating common carriers. BCL also support through the issue of certifications where there's casualty our performance to owners and operators of passenger vessels under the PVO program that have provided adequate evidence of financial coverage to satisfy liability incurred for non-performance of cruises and are in the event of death or injury to passengers and other persons at sea that boarded from U.S. port. The OTI program currently has over 9,000 active participants, and the PVO program have over 50 vessel operator participants and over 270 vessels in the program and still counting. It is with great honor to champion the OTI and PVO programs, both valued over $1 billion with a phenomenal group of high-speed industry analysts that handles all obstacles and daily heavy workload with grace. BCL performance rating remains at a 98% annual rating for processing application and rendering licenses, foreign registration, certificates, and conducting 3-year renewals and revocation and termination action. On average, BCL team masters over 15,000 transactions yearly, serving the public from a range of responding to daily inquiries to processing applications, bonds, and non-compliance actions while working with its counterparts, OGC, BTA, BIC, and IT to conduct special projects such as rulemaking, compliance monitoring, initiative, and IT modernizations. Here is BCL organization chart. I would like to give a big thank you to BCL staff. Rusty, Tawanda, Aline, Latrice, Moses, Kevin, Robin, Lee, Ms. Enor, Mike, Marilyn, Jaden, Fernando, Sean, Alexis, and the late great Ms. Romaine Dandridge for their hard charge and dedication and proudly serving the shipping industry. I will now turn it over to Mr. Russell Haynes to brief you on an overview of the OTI program.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak before the commission today, and I welcome the opportunity to brief the commission on behalf of the Bureau of Certification and Licensing and Office of Ocean Transportation Intermediaries. Today's Ocean Transportation Intermediary agenda will cover an overview of licenses and registrations issued by the commission, a brief discussion on the OTI bond program, applications processed by the Ocean of Transportation Intermediaries, license and registration revocations and terminations, and voluntary surrenders. For the benefit of those who may not know, by statute, ocean transportation intermediaries are classified as either ocean freight forwarders or non-vessel operating common carriers. Ocean freight forwarders are entities in the United States that must be licensed to book shipments via a common carrier on behalf of shippers and process shipping documents and otherwise act as the agent of a beneficial cargo owner. Non-vessel operating common carriers in the United States must also be licensed, and foreign non-vessel operating common carriers may elect to be licensed or registered. At the end of the second quarter for fiscal year 24, the total number of active licensed OTIs was 5,119. This number represents all domestic ocean freight forwarders and NVOCCs. At the end of the second quarter for fiscal year 24, the total number of active foreign registered NVOCCs was approximately 4,000. There are more foreign NVOCCs registered in China, over 1,800, than any other country, and 4 times the next highest country in India. And if I jump back to the OTI licenses, the top 5 states with principal headquarters of licensed OTIs are California, Florida, New York, New Jersey, and Texas. California and Florida alone represent 48% of all domestic licenses, and the top 5 states combined represent over 75% of principal headquarters of licensees in the United States. The overall combined total of ocean transportation intermediaries at the end of Q2 of the current fiscal year is approximately 9,200 OTIs. I've juxtaposed that with FY21 totals of about 7,700 OTIs to demonstrate that there has been a 16% increase, which is a significant increase in the number of OTIs between FY21 and FY24, with the largest surge between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Current totals roughly match what they were at the end of FY22, and there is a continuing upward trend. Current percentages of all OTIs, 55% are domestic licensed entities, the majority being both ocean freight forwarders and NVOCC licensees. Currently, 44% of OTIs are foreign registered and only 1% are foreign licensed, about 70 OTIs. Continuing to the OTI bond program, prior to a license or registration being issued, a form of financial responsibility is required. While other forms of financial responsibility, such as guarantees or insurance, are acceptable, only bonds have been utilized by the OTI industry to evidence financial responsibility. To receive an NVOCC license, applicants are required to submit a $75,000 bond. For an ocean freight forwarder license, a $50,000 bond, and for a foreign NVOCC registration, a $150,000 bond. While foreign NVOCCs represent 44% of all OTIs, they hold 55% of the distribution of bond liability. Licensed OTIs conversely represent 55% of total OTIs in terms of numbers, but hold 45% of the total bond liability. The OTI bond program currently administers $1.1 billion in OTI bonds. At the end of Q2 for the current fiscal year, the bond program processed over 2,300 actions to date. OTI applications have remained relatively consistently high from FY20 to FY23. FY22 did have an increase in application activity, but that has leveled off at the end of FY23. The current fiscal year 24 year-over-year numbers are consistent with what we've seen with FY21 numbers. OTI applications are generally separated into 2 categories for reporting purposes: new applications and amended applications. New applications are for any new entrant into the OTI program and include any OTI that has re-entered the program after a license revocation or voluntary surrender. Amendment applications apply to applications that seek to modify an initial application and would consist of one or more of the following: business name or trade name changes, business structure changes, license transfers, changes to a qualifying individual, or adding or removing a service. Application types have remained consistent from FY20 through the current fiscal year, and FY23 and current trends have matched with previous FY21 numbers. We've noticed a slight decrease in application numbers from FY22 to 23, but that is consistent with overall trends in a leveling of numbers, despite changes in user fees. Foreign NVOCCs. Foreign NVOCC registrations have seen a significant increase from FY20 to FY23, peaking in FY22 with a total of 1,345 registrations. In FY23 saw a decline in overall registrations, but the amount is still 3.5 times the volume that was received in FY '20 before the increase took place. And we are on track to surpass FY '23 numbers this fiscal year with 357 registrations at the end of Q2. We saw a decline from FY '20 to FY '21 in license revocations and registration terminations, with license revocations representing the majority of actions. Conversely, in FY 2022, when the surge in foreign registrations occurred, the number of foreign NVOCC terminations outnumbered license revocations for the first time. And we also saw an increase in license revocations compared to the previous year. FY '23 saw a huge surge in foreign NVOCC terminations that far surpassed the license revocations. Additionally, we continue to see a high volume of terminations in the current fiscal year and an increase in license revocations that will likely surpass fiscal year '23. Voluntary surrenders. OTI license voluntary surrenders peaked in fiscal year 2020 and leveled off in fiscal years 21 and 22. And now we've seen a decline in fiscal year 23 that was approximately half of what it was at the peak in FY 2020. The current fiscal year at the end of Q2 has already surpassed all of FY '23 by approximately 20%. Foreign NVOCC registration surrenders remain consistently low despite the increase from FY '21 and '22. We saw a slight decrease in FY '23. Current foreign registration numbers at the end of Q2 match the revocation surrenders of FY '23. This now concludes the OTI program briefing, and I would like to turn things over to my colleague, Ms. Tawanda Singletary, to brief the Commission on the Passenger Vessel Operator Program.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. As Rusty stated, my name is Tawanda Singletary, and I will be providing a brief update for the Passenger Vessel Operator Program. As outlined in the Commission's rules and regulations, as a participant under the Commission's program, passenger vessel operators are required to provide proof of financial responsibility for the non-performance of transportation and for injury or death to passengers, others, and crew. During today's briefing, I will be touching upon the program statistics, financial instruments, unearned passenger revenue, as we refer to as UPR, the Small Business Initiative, and industry highlights. So to get started, there are currently 51 participants under the Commission's program. The aggregate amount of proof of financial responsibility for performance is approximately $763 million. And the aggregate amount of casualty is approximately $773 million. Royal Caribbean Cruise Line has the largest fleet in the program at this time with 26 vessels. However, Carnival is not far behind with 25 vessels. We have 278 certified vessels in the program, the largest one being Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas with 7,600 passenger berths. Actually, this vessel can carry up to 10 passengers or 10 people aboard the vessel, 10,000 people aboard the vessel. The smallest vessel in our program is the Stad Amsterdam at 52 passenger berths. Of the 278 certified vessels that we have, 29 of those vessels are U.S. flag vessels that normally trade in Alaska, Great Lakes, or other river areas. So now moving on to proof of financial responsibility. Proof of financial responsibility may be submitted to the Commission in 4 forms. The forms are surety bonds, guarantees, insurance policies, escrow accounts, or it could be a combination of those methods. As a reminder, every program participant may not be required to provide proof of financial responsibility for non-performance due to not embarking any fare-paying passengers. For performance, we currently have 33 surety bonds, 13 guarantees, 0 insurance policies, and 2 escrow accounts. For casualty, there are 45 guarantees and 5 insurance policies. On the following 2 slides, I will address the number of applications received and the number of certifications issued. The Passenger Vessel Operator Program normally receives a small amount of certification applications, but these entities require an extreme amount of oversight and compliance review. This slide displays fiscal years 2019 through 2023. Here you can distinguish the decrease during fiscal year 2020 and 2021, which was during the pandemic. Also, during this time, staff was working on a rulemaking, which resulted in giving passengers the ability to file claims directly with the financial instrument provider if their reimbursement claims were not addressed by the PVO within 180 days, or if their claims were denied by the PVO. Again, here you're able to distinguish between fiscal year 2020 and 2021, when cruise lines were forced to stop conducting cruises due to the CDC's no-sail order. PVOs delayed the submission of applications until authorization was granted to return to performing cruises. During fiscal year 2022 and 2023, you will notice an increase in the number of certificates issued. Also, in addition to the fiscal 2023 year, staff processed 206 renewal certifications. These certifications are up for renewal every 5 years. Now moving on to unearned passenger revenue trends. So let me explain what unearned passenger revenue is. It's passenger revenue received for water transportation and all other accommodations, services, and facilities that have not yet been performed by the PVO. Passenger revenue includes port fees, taxes, and all auxiliary fees remitted to the PVO by the passenger. So basically, it's all the monies that the passenger pays directly to the cruise line. Between 2019 and 2020, unearned passenger revenue decreased by 41%. This decrease was strictly due to the reimbursing passengers for cruise fares, the inability for cruises to book new passengers for future cruise sailings, and the no-sail order issued by the CDC. Due to the uncertainty of the pandemic and the no-sail order, only vessels having under 250 passenger berths were allowed to conduct cruises. Once the no-sail order was lifted, UPR began to increase, exceeding the previous year's levels, and continued to increase during fiscal year 2022, when people began to feel comfortable to resume cruising. During fiscal year 2023, UPR amount started to level off and return to its normal trend. To assist in alleviating the pressures of the pandemic on small operators, the Commission established an incentive to help small cruise operators remain compliant during the pandemic with the Commission's rules and regulations. The Commission believed that the sudden suspension of most cruise transportation due to COVID-19 had likely significantly reduced some of the PVO's current UPR, leading to substantial disparity between the current UPR and the generally required coverage amount required under 46 CFR 540.5. This disparity could result in unnecessarily high premiums and require collateral for PVOs to maintain their financial instruments. Currently, there remains only one participant in the program. The remaining 50 PVOs are providing proof of responsibility under traditional methods. So here's a snapshot of the cruise line market share and passengers and revenue. This information was gathered from the Cruise Pulse Market Watch, which gathered their information from cruise lines' annual reports, CLIA, the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. As you can see, The largest market share with 37% is Carnival Corporation. The booking revenue amounted to $24.6 billion while carrying 12.9 million passengers. Carnival Corporation includes Carnival Cruise Line, P&O Cruises, Cunard, Costa, Holland America, Seabourn, Ada, and Princess Cruise Lines. The second largest market share is represented by Royal Caribbean International, with 24% of the market share, having $15.8 billion in revenue and carrying 7.7 million passengers. Royal Caribbean International includes Royal Caribbean Cruises, Celebrity Cruises, and Silver Seas. NCL is the third largest corporation with 14.1%, $9.38 billion, and transporting 2.4 million passengers. NCL includes NCL Cruise Line, Regent Seven Seas, and Oceania Cruises. The fourth and fairly new group making an impact in the U.S. trade is MSC, carrying nearly as many passengers as the NCL group combined. Comes in at 7.1%, having a revenue of $4.7 billion and carrying 2.5 million passengers. Disney and TUI carried under 1 million passengers each and have a revenue of 2.8 and 1.5 billion respectively. All other cruise lines combined make up the remaining 11% of the market, having a revenue of 7.4 billion and carrying a total of 2.7 million passengers. So now I'm just going to touch upon a little of the industry highlights. Despite inflation and the higher booking costs, cruise lines are continuing to be profitable. Cruise lines are experiencing record bookings, record book decisions, and record advanced ticket sales. Per CLIA's 2024 State of the Cruise Industry, the United States has the largest increase in cruise passengers at 2.7 million, which is 19% higher than it was in 2019. During the collapse of the Francis Key Scott Bridge, Royal Caribbean and Carnival Cruise Lines moved their operations to Norfolk, Virginia. However, as of May 24th, 2024, the vessels are now commencing cruises from the Port of Baltimore. In a press release from the Maryland's Governor Wes Moore's office, approximately 444,000 people sail out of Baltimore every year. Cruise offerings are being made to retirees, giving them the opportunity to live on ships and travel the world for a flat sum, and some believe that may be more economical than owning a home on land. Single occupancy for these starts at $300,000. Double occupancy is $500,000. Residential communities at sea, leasehold agreements, receive occupancy rights for a certain term up to the full life of the vessel. It could be either 12 years, 24 years, or 60 years. Also, along with the price of your unit fee, you have to pay a unit annual fee, which is $65,000 to $200,000 to live aboard this vessel. Units on the world go from $2 million to $15 million. Currently, we have at least 10 program participants that are conducting world cruises. The price of these cruises range from $20,000 to $100,000. It all depends on the length of the cruise. And that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Singletary. Also, Ms. Hennigan and Mr. Haynes. I really appreciate that. It was a great presentation. I'm going to now yield to my colleagues for questions and comments, starting with Commissioner Dye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for these live in cruise apartments. So what is that? What is the you estimated $200,000? Is that a yearly fee?
Yes, they have a living fee, yearly fee that you have to pay. It could be between $65,000 and $200,000 a year. In addition to what the cost of your unit is.
Mhm. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good to know. Mr. Haynes, I'd like to talk to you about our OTI program that allows American OTIs in China, but yet to deposit money in the US bank. They don't deposit any money in China. So how many of those do we have? Do you know?
At this time, I'm not actually sure, and it's not something that this bureau necessarily tracks.
Right,
We don't get into the business operations of OTIs.
right.
But it could be something certainly that we can look into in the future.
I would like to know that,
Yes, ma'am.
that because that's by agreement with China that they are allowed to deposit their registration money in a US bank rather than a Chinese bank. And I appreciate it. I would very much like to know. Thank you. How many? Great briefing. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Bensel.
Yeah, I have a couple, two questions. Actually, I think Rusty, potentially, Chris Huey, our general counsel, might opine on this one. But during the height of the pandemic, there was a number of allegations made that foreign NVOCCs were very powerful, particularly the Chinese. Most of the Chinese NVOCCs are affiliated with state-owned enterprises and have a lot of capacity, contract capacity. And the allegations were made that in a tight market, it was tough for some shippers to get commodities from other places than China. So, for instance, space on vessels coming from Korea. And I know you're looking more at the issues of how they register and complying with the requirements for certification. But what I'm concerned about is the evidence. If there is malfeasance, some prohibited acts are occurring, it's pretty difficult to get informations on the operations of foreign NVOCCs in particular. A particular concern, of course, is China because of the way they operate. So what sort of tangible information do we have other than the bond and requirements for them to file, have available NSAs and NRAs, so rate agreements, and the service contracts that are on file at the FMC. So if we feel that there is some market distortion activities that are occurring as a result of their activities, what sort of, and I would think Chris probably would want to comment on this as well, but do we have enough leverage to get that information to find out whether or not something's going wrong?
I will comment and say that for the most part, if it is related to registrations, and this bureau is mainly concerned with the financial responsibility that's in place. So if a Chinese foreign registered NVOCC is non-compliant or in somehow malfeasant with the regulations that we have, which would be ocean transportation related activity, that bond is in place for recourse. But beyond that, I would have to defer to general counsel's comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Bensel. So as you know, the commission administers a controlled carrier program in which it looks very closely at the rates and other activities of controlled carriers, which are carriers that are affiliated with a foreign government. In most cases, nowadays, they are affiliated with the government of China. However, as you also no doubt know, the controlled carrier program is limited to ocean common carriers. And so that is a different level of regulation for those carriers, but would not apply to NVOCCs. However, I would point out that in any circumstance in which the commission thinks that it needs additional information from an NVOCC to determine if any conduct might potentially be anti-competitive or otherwise of concern for perhaps prohibited acts, violations, Section 4104 of the statute does allow the commission to secure reports on business activities, other information of common carriers, and it's not limited to ocean common carriers. So that is what used to be called under the previous version of the statute as Section 15 order. And so under what we used to call Section 15 order, the agency would have the option to secure any information that it thought it might need with respect to the activities of entities like that to make regulatory determinations about whether anything needs to happen if there are competitive concerns or other concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a little bit more difficult when they're in China executing this because of geographics and geopolitical issues. So it's just an issue of concern. But you feel that we still have recourse to challenge these activities if we need to.
Yes, I think that option, as well as other options with respect to the fundamental ability to even operate in our trades in the first place, we do control the door to be able to walk through that door or not. And I think with those areas of leverage, the agency does have the ability to examine whether any activities are questionable, and if there were to be a lack of cooperation with an agency effort to secure additional information, we would have several different levers to pull to either ensure compliance with securing the information that the commission might want, or to simply ensure that that entity would no longer operate in our trades.
Yeah, it is a big issue because some of these contracts with in particular Chinese NVOCCs are very large and they control a lot of the market. So thank you for that. Tawanda, I received a call related to a bankruptcy, Crystal Cruises bankruptcy. In that instance, it was a bankruptcy, so we have a bond for non-performance. What is the process that the FMC engages in when there is a bankruptcy? Because that court has a competency to do bankruptcy proceedings related to liquidating the available assets. But does it mean we automatically cede any authority of our own to provide access to the bond? What's the process?
So the process, usually the cruise line would work with us ahead of time, keeping us abreast of what's going on with them so that we can assist them in a great closeout. That didn't happen. So in this case, they would provide us the information, what we need, list of passengers, and we would assist with the surety provider or in this case, it's an escrow with the escrow provider, and assist with distributions of those funds back to the passengers.
But specifically, does the proceeds of the surety go to the bankruptcy court for administration, or do we administer it?
No, we don't administer anything. We work with the
Surety.
yes, who's holding the funds and have those funds dispersed directly to the passengers. They are not due to go back to the bankruptcy court for them to disperse.
Okay.
Or use in any way.
So does the surety work with the bankruptcy court to allow the bankruptcy court to take primacy and the provision of those funds?
Not without talking to the FMC first.
Okay. So we do have some oversight in the.
Yes, we do provide oversight and direction in
Okay.
some sort, but at this time, I can't go into detail,
Yeah.
in this hearing at this time to provide that type of
It's a
information.
particular case.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about the policies here of
Yeah,
how
we
we're
assist.
three parties at play here, a surety, the FMC, and a bankruptcy court. And so I want to know what the policy
Yeah,
is.
we assist, we talk to everyone, we try to get everyone on one accord to try to work on the best closeout for the passengers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Benzel. Just a point of clarification on the OTI issue. To do business in the United States, you have to be either licensed with the FMC or working with a licensed NVOCC, correct? I mean,
So if you must be licensed or registered.
okay,
So if, previously, prior to 2019, foreign registered NVOCCs were required to utilize licensed agents, but that is no longer the case. So now you are either required to be licensed or registered with the commission.
right. Okay, you got it. So no, it's important to note that we changed it. Also important to note, though, that you still have to be either registered or licensed. If you are not, then you should not be doing business within the U.S. It doesn't mean the Commissioner Benzel's point of questions aren't irrelevant, because you can still affect business in the United States in many ways without doing business here. But I did want to clarify that. Thank you. Commissioner Sola.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Very, very good presentation. Thank you, Cindy, Tawanda, and Rusty on that presentation. And I'd also like to say that as I travel the country and travel to the ports in different places, that when I'm home in Florida, BCL is probably the top subject of every speech that I give, and also every single question that comes in. So I'd like to thank you guys for being in the trenches with the consumer protection that you do each and every day, protecting the shippers and protecting the cruisers. With that being said, we've worked together. I'm very glad to see your faces and up here for the last couple of years on a lot of different issues concerning this. And I have the same question for both of you, and hopefully you can help me with that. On the OTI and the bonding procedures there, Rusty, how do we determine what the bond is? And then is it adjustable for inflation every year, or, what is that process? If you could explain it a little bit to me.
So it is a standard amount depending on the service that you provide. So we have a form FMC 48, and depending on if you are an ocean freight forwarder, it remains at $50,000. And if you provide NVOCC services, it's $75,000, and this is for a license. If you are a foreign registrant, it's $150,000, and those are standard across the board. They don't inflate or anything to that degree.
And how long have they been at that level? And is there any inflation adjuster or something like that increases because, no?
No, so I believe approximately, I would say probably 15 years, something to that effect. I would have to look into our regulations to.
The same as my salary. Okay.
But there is no CPI adjustment similar to our OTI or our PVO program.
Excellent. And as I said earlier, probably the number one thing that I talk about in OTIs is how to bring people into licensing. We have a lot of unlicensed people in Florida, and it's good to see them, come into the fold. Ms. Singletary, I have the same question for you, but before I want to go ahead and let you know that I hear about what you do and how you protect the consumers every single day when I'm back home in the cruise capital of the world. It's very important, the job and the work that we do. And I also see that, when I talk to a cargo CEO, they're always complaining about the other guy, the routes, or the margins are too thin, or they're losing money. A cruise CEO never talks about that. What they're talking about is how they can, just go ahead and maintain the levels and capacity that they have. And we've seen it there on your chart. So how do we determine what that bond issue is for them, since their business is growing? And is there any sort of inflationary kicker that we have for them?
Thanks for that question. So the PVO financial responsibility is based on, for performance, is based on the UPR amount. It's usually 110% of that until they hit the cap right now at $32 million. On the casualty side, it's based in the statute what that amount will be. There is an inflation mechanism in place for PVOs. However, the last increase was in 2020, or it was right before the pandemic, I'm sorry. So 2019. So it's right now at $32 million due to the pandemic, them not sailing, not making any money. That amount has not been increased since that time.
So that brings me to my next question. What would the process be to go ahead and address that number to make sure it's the right number and to increase it?
Well, we have a formula in place that we use to increase that number. We will work on that formula and submit that information for an increase.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today, all three.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. Commissioner Bekich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo my colleagues in complimenting your performances. And I know, especially in Florida, you fly the FMC flag proudly there, and people notice, and it has an effect on enforcement and I think on deterrence. I have a question for Mr. Haynes on your on the OTI numbers. You talked about the top 5 states for OTI licenses, and then you made a reference about 75% are within the top 10 states. So I'm curious what the other 5 states.
Oh, I'm sorry that I must have misspoke. All 5 of those states represent the 75%.
Well, see, you're not getting where I want to go. I'm trying to get a gauge of activity. So can you tell me the next 5 states?
Unfortunately, I don't have that with me at this time, but I can certainly provide that information.
Well, if they're not Georgia, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Washington, I'd be surprised. But I would like that if I could get that from you. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bekich. I do have a couple of questions. We'll start with Ms. Singletary. Thank you very much for your service. Can you just, now I know that you get a lot of calls and from, sometimes our Consumer Affairs Division caters gets a lot of calls, but they may see you. And can you describe a little bit of what kinds of problems that the FMC can help with, and what kinds of problems that the law does not currently allow the FMC to really help with?
So under the PVO umbrella, I will say we can help with if a cruise line files for bankruptcy, if they don't perform a cruise, we would assist the passengers in contacting the PVO and, trying to arrange some type of compensation on their behalf. Some things that they may not be able to help with may be on the more or less on the consumer side. There aren't any laws in place if someone just doesn't like their cruise, they don't like their food, things of that sort. There isn't anything that we can't force the cruise line to compensate in that way. But since they have a proof of financial responsibility with the commission, we can work on the non-performance of transportation, or if someone dies or gets injured at sea. So
it does include the casualty part?
Yes.
Okay. Right. But so yes, I mean, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from calling our Consumer Affairs Division, but know that if you do call our Consumer Affairs Division because, say, you don't like the food, there's nothing that we have that can basically force the carriers or the PVOs to provide different food. We'll give you the best advice we can. Of course, we'll not turn anybody away, but that is just not under our current purview.
That's correct. They will assist in anything that the consumer may have a problem with. It's just that it's not in the statute, or there's not any laws or anything to force the cruise line to compensate them in any way.
You look at the array of cruise lines. You keep track of what countries they're flagged in, what countries actually you obviously keep track of the flags for the vessels. Do you keep track of the countries that those cruise lines are based in?
We capture that information, not that we look at it all the time, but we do capture that information in the application process.
That's fine. Are any of the cruise lines currently doing business in the United States based in the People's Republic of China that you know of?
No, not at this time.
Okay. If that does happen, they follow the same rules, but definitely, obviously let us know, or for that matter, any other controlled carrier where the carrier company would be largely controlled by the government. So Cuba, I can't imagine North Korea, but you never know, I guess.
Okay, will do.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Mr. Haynes, There's a lot of talk these days, and it's particularly since COVID, and the carriers have had a lot of assets, and they've been trying to, I guess, to their credit, follow different strategies. And one of the strategies that some of the carriers have been following is to purchase or acquire NVOCCs or large stake in NVOCCs. If you are a VOCC, though, you still have to register your NVOCCs as NVOCCs separately. How does that work?
So if it is a non-vessel operating common carrier and it's operating in the United States, it will require a license to do so. Now, if an NVO or a vessel operator ships under their own name, they do not require a registration or license at that point.
Right, because that would be right, that they would be a VOCC and licensed under that program. Correct. And that program is administered by
The Bureau,
right, by PTA.
PTA.
Okay, correct. Just want to make sure. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? All right. Commissioner Betzel.
We have a lot of different entities in the maritime area. We have NVOCs, CCs, freight forwarders, customs brokers, licensed agents. I've heard of delivery agents. And a lot of times these companies operate under the same, they have multiple authorities. Do we have a way of understanding when they're operating as an NVOCC or a freight forwarder or a customs broker or delivery agent or a domestic broker? Is there a process that there's some identification that they're functioning in the capacity of an NVOCC? And we've had over the course of my career many situations where people have multiple authorities. And so how do we keep track of when they're operating under each of the legal authorities that they have?
So here at the commission under section 46.515, we do have definitions of those separate services. And it really does not depend on what the entity calls itself, but the actions they perform. And if they fall within those definitions, then they are acting as an NVOCC or an ocean freight forwarder as we define it.
So it's basically subjective after the fact that we don't really have a process that says, here's your license number that you put on your contract as an NVOCC.
I mean, if they come in and they are performing those services, or if somebody refers them to us as unlicensed activity, we will certainly advise them at that point to say, you know, if you look at these definitions and you're performing any of those actions, you should have a license or a registration at that point.
Okay, it's just, there's a lot of people with a lot of different authorities and they can seem to dip in and dip out as it suits their needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Benzel. Before moving on, I just want to say something. Bureau of Certification and Licensing, the term certification and licensing, I'm not sure if, oh, okay, let me yield to Commissioner Vekich then. Commissioner Vekich, and then I'll continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to consumer protection on passenger ships. So yeah, you don't mess with the small stuff, the food, the complaints, maybe the sanitary conditions of the vessel.
No.
The law just doesn't cover that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The things I've seen as working on cruise ships is people being left behind because there was a glitch in their documentation or a glitch in the travel agents' arrangements, not having the right visas, not being informed they have to need a passport to go to Canada on the Seattle to Alaska cruise. And so my guess is that you dealt with these sorts of things.
We have received calls about those sorts of things, yes.
It's pretty heartbreaking when you see a family, especially from another country, wanting to go on a cruise and coming to our country and then being told, guess what? You can't go. And, you know, we had a term we called the penalty box on the dock where they were, and people tried to be nice to them and cheer them up, but, you know, we're not morale officers. So it's tough. So I appreciate your agencies fixing those problems for some of those people. I always thought, cruise ships try. It seems like they try, but a lot of times it's not the cruise ships that that are the problem.
I would say that's really not or under our coverage. So the only thing that we would assist with this office would be non-performance of transportation. So the cruise line or the cruise does not perform at all. Not individual passengers that did not make it to the port in time or didn't have the correct documentation. That's outside of the scope. So it's only if that entire cruise does not sail for some reason.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, again, a different bureau caters might be able to counsel people in that situation, but it's not covered under the law that BCL handles. Even the word certification and licensing, believe it or not, there are some people that don't find this extraordinarily exciting. I mean, you laugh. There's some people who don't even find the commercial regulation of ocean shipping that exciting. I mean, certainly none of those people are in this room. But I do want to tell you both, as well as Ms. Hennigan, and I am so glad that you mentioned every single person that works at the Bureau of Certification and Licensing, particularly the late Mrs. Dandridge, who recently passed away after serving 60 years in total service to the U.S. government, most of which at the FMC. It is extremely important what you do. I don't believe that the ocean transportation system would function very well or function at all, and particularly for smaller shippers, smaller importers and exporters, without ocean transportation intermediaries, freight forwarders and VOCCs, and they wouldn't be able to function credibly, reliably, and effectively without the work that you do. So it is just extraordinarily important. And then I'll add on top of that your responsibilities, Ms. Singletary, to the passenger ship industry, to consumer protection there, to doing what we can do to shore up that industry. Very, very important, by the way, after COVID. And I know Commissioner Sola did a lot of work with Fact Finding 30 to make sure that industry could come back. And lo and behold, they're doing better than ever. Again, very, very important. So I am concerned that, because this department, isn't in the news a lot. It wasn't particularly covered under OSRA because, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. But I do want you to know, and I think I speak for every member of this commission, how grateful we are, how important your work is to the Federal Maritime Commission, and indeed, I think, to the American people, and very, very much appreciated. Which does bring me to one last question, which is I have noticed that there is no BCL director. Can you give me a little bit of a sense, Ms. Hennigan, about what the timetable is for that? Because at the moment, you've been doing double duty as Deputy Managing Director and BCL Director. So I'm not, and mainly I only ask to see if there's any support that we as commissioners or as a full commission can give.
Thank you for that question. Because of this fabulous group, I've been able to do those double duties. But we are still working on that, going through the process of that as well too. So hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. So it is still ongoing.
Obviously, yeah, obviously, I think this commission, I'll only speak for myself as chairman, but we want to give you and BCL our full support. And so if there is anything we can do to help in any way, please let us know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to go to the second item. Would you announce the second item, Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the second item on your agenda is staff update on vessel operating common carrier audit program. This item will be presented by Managing Director Lucio Marvin, Counsel to Managing Director Tara Nielsen, and Bureau of Trade Analysis Analyst Jason Guthrie. Will you please take your seats?
Thank you very much. Ms. Marvin, you may begin.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners Dye, Bensel, Sola, and Vekich. I'm pleased to present you today with an update of the ongoing FMC audit program, which originally was known as the VOCC audit program. It was expanded in 2023 to include marine terminal operators. With me to present are members of the FMC audit team, my counsel, Tara Nielsen, and the newest member of the team, Jason Guthrie, from the Bureau of Trade Analysis. As a refresher, the audit program was launched in July of 2021 to address concerns with the detention and demurrage by carriers and to encourage dialogue between the FMC staff and carriers. The audit program collects data from the 9 largest carriers serving the U.S. trades, and those are CMA CGM, Costco Shipping, Evergreen Marine Corporation, Hapag-Lloyd, HMM, Maersk, ONE, and Yang Ming. While these are the carriers that we regularly collect data from and talk with, the program covers additional large carriers and marine terminal operators that service the U.S. market. The audit team regularly communicates with carriers on the FMC's areas of responsibility and rules, along with industry conditions and hot topics. We're working to bring MTOs more into the fold. Not only does the program help to ensure compliance with all relevant commission rules and regulations, it also leads to best practices and other findings beneficial to all segments of the ocean transportation industry. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason to cover data.
Thank you, Lucy. Good afternoon. Under the FMC audit program, the selected 9 carriers provide the total amount of detention and demurrage that is billed, collected, and refunded on a quarterly basis. Between the second quarter of 2020 and the fourth quarter of 2023, approximately $17 billion in demurrage and detention was billed, of which $14 billion was collected and $2.6 billion was refunded. In the fourth quarter of 2023, roughly $233 million was billed and $253 million collected. As can be seen on this chart, the amounts billed and collected rose as purchases of consumer goods went up during the pandemic, reaching a peak in early 2022. Data for the most recent quarter, on the other hand, suggests that detention and demurrage billing and collection have returned to pre-pandemic levels. This is not to suggest that detention and demurrage are no longer an issue of interest to the FMC, far from it. It is encouraging evidence, however, that the Commission's efforts in terms of establishing best practices, its ongoing enforcement activities, and yesterday's newly effective final rule on detention and demurrage billing could continue to reduce the negative impacts of excessive detention and demurrage on U.S. ocean commerce. Next slide. The FMC audit program also collects information on lockouts or denials of access to pick up containers based on non-payment of detention and demurrage fees. We note that the number of lockouts in aggregate has declined for the 3rd straight quarter as of the fourth quarter 2023. Lockouts are highly dependent on the individual policies of each carrier, but we anticipate that the number of lockouts may continue to be further reduced, again, with yesterday's new regulations on detention and demurrage billing. This slide deals with reported fall down, which is how we refer to bookings canceled by either shipper or carrier. We continue to show that the number of reported cancellations at a 2-year low for shippers and remains at approximately 1% for carriers. These numbers may be more reflective of market conditions and overall demand than issues related to detention and demurrage. But the relatively flat to negative trend for these numbers suggests a generally calm environment through the fourth quarter of 2023, following the tumultuous period during and immediately after the pandemic. Even so, we caution the industry overall that cancellations exceeding 30% can have a significantly negative impact on that industry's overall health. And I will pass it now to Tara, who will discuss disputes.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. The FMC audit team also collects information from those largest 9 carriers on disputes that they receive for demurrage and detention charges from their customers. This dispute information gives us a larger picture on shipper complaints. As we know, not every dispute is brought to the commission through our various assistance offerings, whether they be filing a proceeding with the Office of the Administrative Law Judges or a request for assistance informally from the Office of Consumer Affairs and Dispute Resolution Services, or if it's filing a charged complaint under OSR 2022 with the Bureau of Investigations, Enforcement and Compliance to investigate. As we can see from this slide, the number of reported disputes on detention and demurrage charges have been relatively flat over the last 2 quarters of 2023, as the number of resolutions reached as well has been flat. Initial data received for the first quarter of 2024 also suggests that this trend is continuing. This, combined with the total amount of demurrage and detention collected that we showed you earlier, indicates that carriers have returned to levels of demurrage and detention similar to those in 2020, when the total amount of demurrage and detention billing rose in 2021 and 2022. The amount of demurrage and detention and charges disputed likewise rose and since has come back down. This is despite new practices initiated by carriers in recent years. But however, demurrage and detention charges don't appear to have significantly decreased below 2020 levels. When looking at the numbers of disputes received, they are nearly equal to the number resolved in the last 2 quarters of 2023. It therefore appears that the carriers are able to keep up with reviewing and responding to these complaints at their current levels in a timely fashion. Again, while the total amount of disputes have trended downward from their highest in 2022, there are still many demurrage and detention charges disputed by customers. And the commission has a strong interest not only in having the industry follow the law, but also in adopting best practices. And this will continue to be a focus of the audit program. And I'll now turn it back to the managing director.
Thank you, Tara. As we mentioned earlier, one of the main goals of the program is to foster an ongoing dialogue with carriers and MTOs. The program has regular touch points throughout the year with both of these entities to discuss current topics. So recent discussions with carriers were held in April and May of this year, and we'll talk more about those discussions in the closed session. So as for now, sort of looking forward next steps, we'll continue to hold meetings with both carriers and MTOs in late summer and early fall. That'll be our aim to have our next round. Like I said, we'll discuss more details in the closed session, but I just wanted to give everybody that heads up who might be listening today. But that concludes our presentation, the open session today on the audit program. Thank you. We're happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Marvin, Mr. Guthrie, and Ms. Nielsen. I will go to the commissioners for questions. I do want to respectfully request that the commissioners keep their questions fairly general, or at least make sure that they don't go into any kind of matters that would require for a complete answer the staff to go into any data or stuff that we've learned through the audits that might be proprietary and would be better suited for the private executive session. Commissioner Dye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will save my questions for the private session. I would like to say that I would prefer that this program be referred to as our compliance program rather than our audit program, not to be confused with the BCL programs, their audits that they conduct with OTIs. And I'd also like to talk with my colleagues about including compliance requirements and working with our compliance officials in our compromise agreements. And I'd like to talk to my colleagues about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Commissioner Bensel.
During the pandemic, we saw the graph that I'm looking at looks a lot like the graph in rates and congestion as well. It's almost the same graph. This is really symptomatic of congestion. All of these were related to tribulations getting cargo into the ports, and then the charges go up and the rates go up. And supply and demand usually is the motivating factor that controls most of these events. But we were focused on detention and demurrage. And I know separately the Bureau of Transportation and Analysis is looking at blanked sailings, and carriers are authorized to take those in certain circumstances according to the agreements. Have we had any thoughts about looking at those as part of this program as well?
Commissioner Bensel, thank you for that question. We have spoken with the carriers about blank sailings, fall downs, things like that, really since the beginning of the program. So, which is why we're tracking the information. Just determining at one point it was very severe, in tracking the trends of that.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing an uptick right now. Some of the events of the Red Sea closures and potentially dislocation of containers. It's a complicated system, but we're looking a lot at the tail end of those issues. So as we go forward, I think we should think about how we can maybe maximize our evaluations of the industry in these areas.
We will do, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bensel. Commissioner Sola.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marvin, for the presentation. I think I would have more of a general comment, and I'll save the other comments for the private section. When we have the audit program or compliance, I believe it's very valuable to have a two-way street or two-way line of communication in that. And one thing that I would like to see more, as we call it the compliance or audit program, would be an ability to go ahead and encourage the carriers to self-report. And I say that because we have some rulemaking coming out here, any hour. It's only been on the books for a little bit of time, and I think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains and these type of things. So I think that we should encourage them in a way, rather than for us to go ahead and look at for the needle in the haystack, that they kind of bring it up and say, hey, this is a concern of ours. How can we work together? And then we should be receiving of that information. So that was the general comment that I had, and I hope that we can encourage more of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. I agree with you, and I think that's something that we really try to facilitate in our conversations with carriers, and I think it's been really fruitful. I think they try to give us a heads up if there's something notable that's coming that could raise questions from us, trying to sort of head it off at the pass. I think that helps inform what we do, but thank you very much. I'll take that with us.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. Commissioner Bekich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for Ms. Nielsen regarding the D&D disputes. It seems that the disputes are more often resolved in recent quarters. What do you attribute this change to? And a follow-up, and have OSTRA and FMC actions facilitated this industry improvement?
Well, the audit team has had a lot of discussions with the carriers in particular over the course of years on best practices for demurrage and detention. I know there's been a lot of changes made. I would like to think that has a part in it. I think what I was pointing out in one of the slides, with it being around the same levels as 2020, is there may be still more work to go.
And same goal, but I'd like to also ask how the audit program is assisting the enforcement efforts.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Vekich. At the moment, what we do is, it's a voluntary program between us and the carriers. And again, we're trying to bring MTOs into the fold. So far, there hasn't been anything that we've come across that we sense is a Shipping Act violation or, some kind of something that crosses our regulations or anything like that. I think the spirit of our program is this voluntary exchange back and forth and relationship building. I think what underpins everything we do in our agency as regulators and the bureaus, if there is something that we would detect that would be problematic, we would certainly, turn that over to enforcement to look at. But again, the spirit of the audit program is more this, the exchange of information.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vekich. I do have a couple of questions. I think, first of all, I want to congratulate you all. I think this program, whatever we want to call it, has been very, very successful in increasing compliance overall among carriers, but also increasing communication. Hopefully, we've avoided a fair amount of disputes simply by making sure, giving guidance, sometimes being able to establish best practices that actually, it can be in the same language that the carriers speak, so to say. I do want to ask Ms. Marvin, there are things from time to time, even though there's a set of questions that you always ask, there are different topics that you will bring up from time to time. So for instance, I think during COVID, you were asking more about exports and various exports. Can you just go into a little bit of how that works just for the general public to understand?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question, Chairman Maffei. Yes, the great thing I think about our program and a highlight is that we can pivot depending on what the issue is on the supply chain at the time. And gosh, we've seen a lot of things, happen in the last couple of years, especially coming out of the pandemic. So we really have the flexibility to have these discussions with the carriers and with the marine terminals, and they seem very actually eager to have the opportunity to have this exchange. So for example, another one area that we covered, you may all recall when there was an issue with moving empties, it was really kind of up and down the East Coast, and that's something we were really able to look at and mobilize really that information quickly. It's as easy as sending a letter out to the carriers and saying, hey, and we've established these compliance officers, so we really have a red line to the top of every company. And if we've got an issue we need to look into, then that's what we do. Another matter, the most recent, I would say, was when the Key Bridge collapsed in Baltimore due to the elision that happened there, which we'll talk about more. But we were able to very quickly reach out to all the carriers and say, hey, how is this impacting your business? And what are you doing? And how is your level of communications? What is your level of service? Where are things being, redirected to? And I think that, like I said, our sense is nobody pushes back on us. They want to share this information. They want to make sure we know what is going on, so that, we all just stay informed. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chairman, and is helpful also to the public listening.
Absolutely, it does. And actually, apropos of that, I might request that you and your team ask a bit about, and I can give you more detail on this, but certain kinds of congestion fees and peak season surcharges that we've heard from shippers have been promulgated a little bit earlier in the season and that sort of thing. So it's an area where not necessarily saying that anything is going on at the moment, not necessarily saying anything illegal, but at least get some information, find out, what if there are fees, what they're for, and that sort of thing. So I'll talk to you more about that separately. I also wanted to express my openness to changing the name. I mean, we've kept the name because of the brand, but it's true, NVOCC audits. I mean, I know, and sometimes we even talk to non-NVO, I'm sorry, VOCC audits. It's not always VOCCs, it's not really audits, so we can try to change that. And in fact, I do believe that the sort of an idea for, or at least a prototype idea for this was Commissioner Dye's during Fact Finding 29 under my predecessor, but I stole it fair and square when I became chairman. So it's following President Reagan's advice. So in any event, though, the truth is that it's been completely shaped and by you and your team, Ms. Marvin, and I think it is a very valuable program, certainly for the FMC, certainly for the particular carriers, but I think the ultimate beneficiaries are America's importers and exporters, because the more we can really focus on in our enforcement on areas where there really is a problem, really is a lack of compliance, a purposeful lack of compliance or whatever, but a lack of compliance or whatever increased understanding with this particular program, I think the better. Are we okay to move on to private session? Okay. Okay. So with that, Mr. Secretary, are there any public announcements that need to be made?
Mr. Chairman, there are no announcements.
Okay, and then I'm going to respectfully ask that any of our public guests depart the room, and we'll have a very brief, I'm going to say we're going to have an 8-minute recess. I know probably that's a little ambitious, but an 8-minute recess to 2:30 and then we'll reconvene in